Welcome back. It's time for another Waterproof Records. I'm glad to see you here listening. Well, I'm not really seeing you. I'm just looking at my iPhone camera right now, which is documenting this part of the show. But let's just pretend that I'm looking through wherever you are right now, and I'm staring at you through the abyss. And we're together. We're going to listen to music. We're going to talk about music. It's going to be amazing. I love having you here on Waterproof Records, and I'm so excited for today's show because I made friends with this gentleman online. We befriended each other that way first, and then I finally got to meet him and hang out with him for a little bit, and I'm looking forward to doing that again sometime soon. You already know who my guest is. There's no surprise here because you clicked on the episode, you saw it in the title, and you were like, no way. Jacob Givens got this dude? Amazing. But before we get there, we're going to kick off with the song, do the sponsor. You know the drill, so let's get to it. So today, I am thrilled to welcome the amazing, incredible songwriter, guitarist, producer, musician extraordinaire, Chris Traynor. Let's go.
Things are gonna change, I can feel it.
If this gonna be that kind of party, I'm gonna...
Waterproof Records. Waterproof Records. Waterproof Records with Jacob Givens.
All right, before my gaze moves down to my Zoom camera and I welcome Chris onto the show, we're going to talk about DistroKid. DistroKid is the sponsor of the show, and I love him. You should love him too. You should trust me on this. I'm telling you right now, if you want to get your music out into the world, you got to use DistroKid. They make it so easy. And I have a special link, very important link, VIP, very important person with the link. It's a VIP link, and it's in all the descriptions of these episodes. And you can find it pretty much everywhere on all my social media links, distrokid.com/VIP/waterproof. If you use that link, you get 30% off your first year of using their services. And if you don't know about DistroKid, it is the fastest and easiest way for you to get your music around the world, like that. They make it super simple. You upload your songs and you are on Spotify, iTunes, Tidal, a million other services. They even give you the YouTube music channel. You know, when you go to YouTube and there's like the official YouTube stuff, come on, that's incredible. So you got to do DistroKid. It'll help all that art and amazing sounds that you're creating in your home and give it to the world. Why would you not give it to the world? So once again, distrokid.com/VIP/waterproof, 30% off your first year. Special thanks to DistroKid. I couldn't do the show without you. But now, the moment we've been waiting for. The time is now, and I cannot wait to introduce Chris Traynor, the incredible guitar player of bands like Orange 9mm, Rival Schools, Helmet, Bush, Gavin Rossdale's solo work, so many bands, and we're going to get to them right now. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome Chris Traynor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How's it going?
Good, dude.
Good to see you.
It's so good to see you. This is like, we got a chance to finally meet in person, not just on social media, at the last Bush show in Anaheim. And it was a historic, it was one for the books for me. It was a historic moment for sure.
It was so amazing to see you. And then we got to take a picture on stage afterwards.
Yes.
Doing a little posing on stage.
Yes.
That was so really cool. I remember the first time I ever saw you, and I just I was so captivated by your love of music and what you did, what you were doing. I think one of the first things I ever saw maybe was a Smashing Pumpkin thing. I can't remember what it was, but I just thought that's exactly how I felt when I saw that.
Yes.
And I just thought it was amazing that, you're doing something that it just made me feel you, made me understand who you were, and we became friends, that way.
Yeah, I'm so happy to hear that, and that was a thrill for me. It was probably the video I made for Mayonnaise where the wind is blowing my face on the guitar squeal. That one seemed to get to everyone. So yeah. Man, it was so cool when we connected, and one of our first interactions, we were following each other, and I knew about your work and I knew about your guitar work. And then I love that our first real major interaction was you made this picture on Instagram of you in front of rock formations. And you were like, I'm going to do a contest who can come up with the best pun. And I saw it right when you dropped it. And I was like, man, I love doing puns so much. That's like one of my favorite things. I'm a dad. I drop puns left and right. So I was like, think fast, think fast, think fast. And it was something like, something for granted. That's a nice pick. And I did GNEISS. And I did all these like really ridiculous geology related puns into the comment. And then you were like, I announced Jacob Givens is the winner. And you sent me a Kingdom Come signed CD in the mail. And I was like, I can't believe I got this. This is so, so cool. It was such a great moment. And then that's really what kind of started us talking to each other and furthered the friendship. So do you remember that when you did the Stones?
Yeah. Yeah. And that was me. I was working on a ranch, one of the first ones I ever got a chance to ride horses on cattle. And so that was somebody, my neighbor actually came out with me and took that photograph, and I posted it. And Corey and I, the bass player in Bush, were like, I said, Corey, you got to help me, because a lot of them were really bad and a lot of them weren't even puns.
Right.
So
right.
I was like, and Corey said, Corey didn't know who you were at first. And he said, this is the only person I think who actually knows what a pun is.
Yes,
and
of course like, I do.
So that was really cool. That was a really cool interaction. And Corey loved it too. Corey was like, nobody knows what.
I love it, dude. I know. Look, I've been guilty of being the worst with puns, and so I leap at the opportunity. I say them all the time. My kids give me solid groans, so I have embraced my dad life 100%. And so I knew it. And I saw in the competition, I was like, okay, but there was a K-Rock. I feel like there was a K-Rock DJ, like somebody that I was really familiar with, who was like a front runner with me. I feel like we were neck and neck. And and I was like, Allie, you'll be able to get this from Chris no matter what. Let me just have this. And so I was so happy.
I actually wrote her and I said, I know you for a long time and yours is great, but if I let you win, that's going to be like insider trading.
Totally.
People.
Totally. If she would have won, I would have messaged. I would like, Allie, come on! I've been listening to you on the radio for years. Let me have this. But yeah. I was stoked, and once it came in the mail, I did this video where I was so excited to open it up, and it was the first time. This was kind of early in my things are growing on the internet, and I published the video, and right away somebody really kindly was like, hey dude, your address is like just laid out for the whole world to see as you're opening up that package. And it had not dawned on me that might be a problem for me, just the whole world knowing where I live. So I was like, oh, I gotta fix this. And even since I still completely forget, because for me, little over 2 years ago, this wasn't happening in my life. I wasn't, making silly music videos and going to see Bush and talking to Chris and meeting Gavin and, all the things that have happened. And so my life has changed so tremendously. And it's been just so awesome to interact with heroes and gifted musicians and get a chance to see them live and hang out. And so I'm not only just thrilled that we got a chance to meet and that we're talking right now, but that you agreed to come on Waterproof Records, which I've been dreaming about for a while now. So I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, it's so cool. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk a little bit about meeting Dean and Robert? Because I love those guys.
Yes, absolutely. I'd love to talk about that. You're the first episode that I'll be putting out since I went to Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp. So to give the audience kind of a brief rundown, I think I said I'm headed to it soon, but it happened. The event occurred, and it was really a dream come true. It's this thing that's been going on for 27 years, Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp. And, it's not an easy thing to get into because it's a little costly to be a guest, but they reached out to me and they were like, we'd love for you to come. We've seen your videos. We like what you're about. And as soon as I saw the guests were Robert and Dean DeLeo, I was like, and Kim Thale from Soundgarden, I was over the moon. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And so I was so in. 1993, my first real rock concert was seeing STP right off of Core coming out in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so I knew I was so excited about that. And then Robert and I started messaging each other through Instagram, and we started talking, and I was like, I'm going to be at Rock Camp, dude. I'm going to be there. And he's like, dude, what song do you want to play? And I was like, Dead and Bloated all the way. And so we got a little friendship going. And then the day that they show up, it was cool. I felt like a badass because, you know, all the campers are really excited that the DeLeos are there and they're handling the moment with care. And I go upstairs and there's a couple other people waiting there in the lobby, and Robert sees me and he's like, "Jacob!" And we just hugged. And you could see all these other people who are like managing the camp looking up like, how does this dude know Robert DeLeo, you know? And so that was like, I was freaking out. And then the same thing happened with Dean. Those guys, they made me feel like I was an honorary DeLeo in like 5 minutes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're
Such
incredible
good
people.
Yeah.
They're incredible people. They're terrifying musicians.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
they're so good. I remember the first year, I think in 2002, when I was touring with Bush, we played a couple of outdoor radio festivals where like we would open for Stone Temple Pilots and they would open for us on the stages. And I remember the first time I saw them play, I was terrified. Like they were so good. I was like, these guys are so good.
Yes.
You know, we had to play after them that show. I think it was in Atlanta. It was quite a while ago, like, you know, 20 years ago, but
yeah.
they're just amazing. They're amazing dudes. They're amazing players, and they're so kind. They're so kind. And to me, they're like the closest thing that we had to Led Zeppelin in the 90s. That's what I think. Like they're incredible musicians and guitar players. They know so much about music, like how they play is so original. And you know, I'm lucky we've done a lot of tours with them. So I've had a lot of like breakfasts in Australia with them or different places in the world we've been together, and they're just incredible dudes. And Robert loves to fish. And so we both kind of love nature.
Yeah. So
we always talk about like where we'd, you know, what kind of dream places we'd like to be eventually. And they're great dudes. I consider them family. Now they also promised me that I could play a song with them. And I asked Dean if we could play Army Ants because I want to do the split solo.
Oh, absolutely.
I would love to do that.
You got to do it.
But it hasn't. So I don't know if they're like leading me on, but you know.
Well, I'm thinking now I'm huge into nature. You're huge into nature. So's Robert. I'm thinking like, you know, some kind of hiking thing is going to start occurring. And then that'll be the moment where you can be like, you know, we still haven't played.
Yeah. And you'll just like discreetly pull out like a Martin backpacker and like start.
100%. That's the plan, dude. That's the plan. We're going to start the rock hike crew. We're going to find every outdoorsy musician who lives in Southern California. Just you're so right about their kindness, their generosity. They made everybody at camp feel special. They just took a lot of time to talk to people, and they made them feel really welcome. And no part of them felt like they were rushing to get out of there. And those guys are just watching brothers play together. They're just in lockstep. You know, they're so in sync with each other. And that was even asked in their Q&A as to, you know, how it is playing with other musicians as opposed to each other. And they talked just about the shorthand. They've been playing music together since they were teens. And that was really cool to see. And you're right about the Led Zeppelin. I remember being a teenager and the chords that were being played back before the internet, and you could try to get your hands on like a Guitar World with a tab, but there was a lot of this like discussion as to like, what chord is this? What kind of jazz, you know, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever position on the fret are we playing? And it was really fun because it was watching him play, and you go, just such a unique style and chord changes. And so, yeah, they're really, really superior musicians, and it was an honor to meet them for sure.
Jimmy Page played a lot like that too. I learned how to play guitar off the Zeppelin records on vinyl.
Yeah.
One of my cousins got married and his wife wouldn't let him have his record collection for some reason. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting a story right. No disrespect to her, but I got his Zeppelin records one way or another. And I spent the summer indoors I stole my sister's like Fisher Price plastic record player.
Nice.
And I would just like do a riff and learn it. And a lot of times, especially when I was growing up, you think, oh, I know how this Zeppelin thing goes because it's how it feels, you know, like we feel music sometimes more than we listen to it.
Right.
Which is not a bad thing. But Jimmy Page played, when you get like down into it, the stuff that he was doing,
Hmm.
It's strange. It's not like common bar chords and stuff like that. And that's a lot. I think that's also why I say like Zeppelin, because I think Dean pulls a lot of that stuff,
Yeah.
into the 90s
Yeah.
and now.
Yeah, absolutely. And was that your experience too as a guitarist as a kid, that it was a lot of figuring stuff out on your own on the guitar, initially, just kind of like making it up as you go, and then learning the quote unquote correct way to do things later? Or what was kind of your journey as a guitar player?
My parents, who took good care of me, couldn't afford to have lessons. I had one lesson. I
Yeah.
walked with like an acoustic guitar case in cowboy boots, like 6 miles in the snow. I'm not joking.
Really, really. And
And
this was in New York? In New York?
yeah, in Long Island.
Yeah.
When I went to high school, and the guy, I can't even remember what the guy taught me. Like, it was at the time when everybody was doing like super shreddy stuff, but it wasn't enough to go on. So I just learned by ear. I learned, so I learned a lot of like classic rock stuff first. And then I started to get into bands like Jane's Addiction and Smashing Pumpkins, like the earlier of the alternative, like
Yeah.
they came out a bit earlier. And then I started writing my own stuff. Like right away, I got a record deal with Orange 9mm, I think when I was 18.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times when we did our first tour, I was definitely under 21 and I couldn't get into certain clubs. Like I would do a sound check
Really?
and then they wouldn't let me back in because I didn't have ID. And I was like, I'm supposed to be playing my one show in California. My band was on stage waiting for me. And I'm like, I'm supposed to be there.
Oh,
They wouldn't let me in because I was too young.
wow.
So then, of course, the journey is like when I started playing with Gavin, and we did a record with all studio musicians, and Paige Hamilton from Helmet is a highly educated musician. All those dudes were actually in the original band, and so I learned over time.
Yeah.
And I had this journey of learning guitar and learning about theory and doing stuff like that. But really, what I've come back to is your initial impulse as a musician, like what gets you into music, is what's special about you.
Right.
And that's really like, I just did an interview, like a rig rundown for a guitar magazine. And I'm really trying to encourage people to just play. Like, you don't have to be the fastest guitar player or know the most stuff, or you don't even have to know the notes. The notes could be called like snake, tree, bush. Like, it doesn't,
Yes.
no pun intended, but
like, well done. Well done.
So like, just playing, like what I was saying, how I get enjoyment out of the stuff that you do, because it makes me feel what I feel about music. I think that's what people gravitate towards,
Right.
is a feeling
Yes.
in music, like a feeling that it gives to you. And then, when you're going through certain times in your life, like let's just Heartache's an easy one. And you hear a song and you're like, it totally means something deeper and heavier and new, like when you're going through a breakup or something like that. So I've gone this full circle of studying a lot and trying to learn a lot of theory, but coming back to like what's inside of you and what draws you to music is what makes your music special.
Yeah, agreed. And as a kid, when I got my guitar, I was very much the same. My parents, we did the piano lesson thing for a little while. But given that piano music wasn't really, the thing that was happening, that music explosion, it wouldn't be until Ben Folds 5 maybe that I, or Tori Amos, that I was like starting to infuse, piano work into what I was enjoying. But besides classical as a kid. But I when I got my guitar, I knew this kid in my town who played the bass, and he was so fucking good. He was like, he could play, like it seemed like at the time it was like Les Claypool slapping, going all over the place. And I remember feeling so discouraged because I just didn't understand the guitar and I wanted to give up. And you know how it is when you first pick up the guitar. It's so frustrating because there's that first curve, that first hump you got to get over in order to continue playing. And I remember just being like, I can't be fixated on one, trying to play like somebody that I admire, or knowing everything and understanding it. I just gotta play. I just gotta kind of take it one day at a time and try to figure out songs that I'm enjoying and listening to. And the alternative and grunge explosion at least took a little bit of the pressure off, because learning up some bar chords and you could play along to these songs. Whereas when I was younger and it was all glam, hair metal, shred metal. That was super intimidating, right? It was like these guys are like flying all over the neck, and I was like, I'm never gonna get there. But yeah, it was so much more based on a feeling, and I'm so glad you brought that up because I think that that's one of the unifying threads on this show is that the feeling we get, we don't really know how to explain it. We just kind of are compelled, and we have to listen to these songs, and it gives us a feeling, and it's often hard to communicate, but you know, it's something that unifies us all with the songs that we love, you know.
Music is the only art form that goes through you.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So like
That's great.
that feeling, the vibrations, and like as we talk about it, we're basically using ideas and things that we've heard or read before.
Yeah.
And it's a filter. That words are a filter between the actual feeling and trying to describe it.
Yeah.
You know, but it goes through you. The vibrations go through you.
Yeah. That's so true. You mentioned before about the record player, the plastic record player, and listening to Zeppelin. And one of the key features of this show, and I asked you beforehand, and it was like, you know, it's common that this question is hard for people because they're like, oh man, I'm not 100% sure the specific moment, but the Waterproof record, the Unsinkable Tune, the album that really made you go, I've got to play guitar. I have to play guitar immediately. I've got to get my hands on one. I got to start playing. And when I asked you, you had a ton of influences that you were hearkening back to. And we kind of circled in on Led Zeppelin. And what was the album that you were kind of, you know, but you had a lot more. And please feel free to reference those. But which album did you choose from Zeppelin again?
Physical Graffiti.
Physical Graffiti. Yeah. Yeah. What stuck out to you when kind of reminiscing in your mind about Physical Graffiti in particular? Feeling, you know, song.
Well, when I was a kid and I did a lot of stuff I wasn't supposed to, which I don't do anymore.
What?
A friend and I stole somebody's boat at night, and we drove out, and it had a tape player, and we put that record in, and it started for some reason. I was trying to look up the track listing because I remember it being the first song on one of the tapes. It's like a double or a quadruple tape cassette thing.
Yeah.
And we put the cassette of In the Light in, and we were out on the ocean. And I don't know if you've ever been out in the ocean at night, but you can't see. It's pretty dangerous. There's like nothing going on.
Yeah, it's super scary.
And the beginning to In the Light has this crazy keyboard beginning.
Yeah.
And I just remember I was probably high, but I remember like staring out and hearing this keyboard thing, and it just felt like it was going forever. And I was just like, wow, like sucked into the darkness. And then it comes in with that riff, bow, 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 and I was just like floored.
Yeah.
Like it was terrifying.
Right.
And I think like there's an aspect of the music that I gravitated towards has like a slightly dangerous, like kind of terrifying edge to it.
Right.
And that was like what I remembered about that record. But the truth is that, you know, growing up in the 80s, it was a totally different time.
Yeah.
And we had this band of kids that was a high school graduates, and they would come in and like play at like lunchtime, and they would play Allman Brothers, and like the guitar player wailed on those slide things.
Wow.
And I was like, I got to do this.
Yeah.
You know, I try to find, I knew I wanted to play guitar. And then we would like, I don't know why they let kids roam around back in the day that they don't do it now, but we would like roam around. And I remember, you know, being in parking lots where people had Camaros and they were playing like Zeppelin, and you'd hear like Black Sabbath coming out of the cars. It was like a real car culture,
right.
You know? And so I was like, told one of my parents I was interested in guitar, and they were like, well, your great grandfather's guitar is like under the steps.
Yeah.
And like I went and I crawled like through all this like dusty stuff, and I pulled out like a 1950s Gibson Epiphone archtop. It's actually pre-Gibson.
Really?
Yeah. And I just like figured out how to put strings on it. And I think I learned because that high school band also played it Sweet Child of Mine. I think that might have been the first thing I ever taught myself,
Yeah.
because
That opening, boo dee doo
Yeah.
doo wee doo wee doo.
yeah. But it's a confluence of influences,
Yes. Yeah.
and there was a lot of things happening, and I was influenced by the older kids, like, because I was just like out in the street, and there was like hearing kids play this or sneaking into parties of older kids when you're younger and like hearing AC/DC, in like a backyard, like keg party somewhere. Yes. And I just thought like, this is, and it's still in a way like, I love a lot of modern music, and I went through the 90s, like actually touring in bands and meeting these bands that were great. But there's something about the initial impulse of like those bands like Zeppelin, Sabbath, AC/DC, where it's just like so powerful and so raw because they didn't have a lot going on. Like AC/DC is exceptionally raw.
Yeah.
But like still kids today. And that's the interesting thing about the digital age. Like there's no timeline anymore. Right. When we were growing up, it's like, oh, you got to get big by like you're 25. And then like, when you're 30, the music that you like is over. But now like kids go on YouTube and they're like listening to Iron Man because it's good. Yeah. And they like it. So there's no timeline for appreciating rock music anymore.
That's so true. Well said. Well said. And this aspect of the music being kind of dangerous, I can totally relate. I think that's what really would draw me in a lot of the time. I've spoke about it a lot on the show, but I grew up in Oklahoma and I came from a religious home. And so there was a stigma about heavy music, rock music, of it being of the devil, of it being an evil thing, of it being a bad influence. That only made it all the more tasty. That made it all the more like, I really want to be close to that sound. And I remember, the older kids, I was also influenced, you and I are only a couple years apart. And I remember the older kids, I made a video about it, about Metallica, seeing those t-shirts on those teenagers older than me was kind of like scary and cool. Mm-hmm. And, I wouldn't even hear Metallica until I saw the one video. That was my exposure. I wasn't hearing Master of Puppets and Ride the Lightning as it was coming out. I was too young at that time, and I didn't even know to get my hands on that. But there was something about those bands that you heard that distorted guitar, and these guys, like you said, didn't have a lot. This is before you had 8,000 different distortion pedals or different ways to make the guitar tone. They were just fuzzing it up, jamming it through the amp, and just really trying to figure out how they could make the craziest sound. So it was like the Wild West of music, of just like, what are we going to do? And people were scared of it. They were like, are you crazy? You can't do that. You can't play a 9-minute song with a crazy solo section in the middle of it. So, it was just so many rules being broken. So going back to it, it still has that same exciting feel. And I too love a lot of modern bands. Of course, the 90s was my biggest influence as a teenager, but that really to this day set that foundation and that point. And so referencing bands like Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin being those foundational things. And then that slide guitar, that guy in your high school playing the slide guitar, I can hear it in your playing now, and I can hear those influences.
Thanks.
Yeah. So I wanted to tell the audience, that you should know who Chris Traynor is, but if you don't have an understanding of kind of his journey, he's been in a lot of bands, but Orange 9mm was the one that put you on the path. And that's the early 90s. I want to say 94 when the first Orange 9mm album came out. Is that roughly right? What you remember around that time? Maybe 93.
I thought it was 93, but who cares? It was a long time ago.
It was a while ago. And you were a teenager, and it was you and Chaka Malik, and you guys did it together. It was your baby. You're the founders of this band. And, you were, if I read correctly, you were doing the bass for a lot of that time too, right?
I've rode on the bass. I think I'm really a bass player.
Really?
I'm like a natural bass player.
That would make sense for your heavy riffs, for sure. Your deep, resonant riffs.
I've heard a lot of that stuff. I had a bass where I had like a Fender Jazz bass that didn't have pickups in it. Mm-hmm. So I used to sit in the corner of my apartment as a kid and smoke cigarettes and just like riff on bass.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, so like if you listen to a lot of the first Orange 9mm album, the bass parts are pretty complex, maybe too complex. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I like writing from the point of the bass, and Chaka taught me a lot about the connection of the bass and the drums. We spent a lot of time together, like talking about music and listening to different genres of music. So that was bass is like, I played bass for a couple shows for Blur.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you
That,
did?
yeah,
I didn't know that.
they were like one of my favorite bands when I was a kid.
Love
And
Blur.
Alex couldn't make it into the country because of they tightened the rules after 9/11. So he couldn't come in for one reason or the other.
Right.
And they wanted, I think that dude's name is Justin, that plays for Beck sometimes. They wanted that guy, Beck's bass player, and he couldn't make it. So my friend from Virgin Records called me up. He said, "Can you do this?" And I was like, "I don't know. It's a lot of songs." It was like 20 songs
Yeah.
in 24 hours I had to learn.
Wow.
And they were like, and I was like, "I don't know if I can do it." And Alex, the only time I've ever spoken to him, the bass player from Blur, called me up and said, "It's bass, mate. Just stick your finger out and go around." So I was like, okay. So I was on 2 flights. I just brought I brought a bass with me, and because I had known the music, actually, I think it would have been pretty impossible to do
if you didn't already know the songs, right?
Yeah, I knew the music, and it was really funny. But when I first went into I don't think they wanted me there. When I first walked into the rehearsal room, like their backs were kind of turned to me, and I was like, okay. And I like plugged in, and I started playing. As soon as I started playing, then they all lit up, and they turned towards me and stuff.
That's amazing. I also am a big Blur fan, and they connected with me more in the 90s than Oasis. I enjoy Oasis, but Blur, I remember just being, like songs like The Universal and Coffee and Tea and Beetle Bum. I just really was digging the sound that Damon Albarn was putting out, and that was a big band for me too. So that what a cool experience to play on stage with them. That's great. I love this idea of you just put your finger out and go up and down the bass. That's such a funny perspective, right? Like for people who listen to the show who aren't guitarists or bassists or whatever, there is this idea of being a guitarist versus being a bassist. Some guitarists have the gall to some bass players to say, well, because I play the guitar, I know how to play the bass. And a person who's come up on the bass is like, that's not true. You know what I mean? It's like there's this idea like you are a bass player if you're a bass player. And so I love that you feel like at your core, that's really where it all started for you.
Yeah, bass is a lot. I think bass is like a vacation.
Yeah.
A lot of fun.
Yeah.
And like, you're responsible for holding it down, but also no one's really scrutinizing you.
Yeah.
And then people that are like pure lead guitar players, like Justin Derrico that plays in Pink's band. He's a friend of ours.
Yeah.
And it's just like you see him, it's like, and you're just like, that's not me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think there's like people that are, you just kind of gravitate towards stuff. And I like riffs, like, like playing in Helmet. I was lucky enough. That was one of my favorite bands. And
mine too.
When Peter first left the band and they were having people, I was in Orange 9 at this point, and they said, oh, people are going to try out. I don't know who tried out, but Rob got the gig. Rob's a great person and a great guitar player. But I was upset. I was like, they didn't call me, but they didn't know who I was. So it didn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
But eventually when I got that gig, it was amazing for me because going through the process of having a major label record deal so young and the expectations that were put on me, it kind of really knocked me out of my stride and put me off my path. So
really?
Like Paige being like a big brother, like took me in, and all I had to do was play these awesome riffs.
Right.
I wasn't responsible for anything.
Yeah.
He wrote all the riffs and they were like, here, do this. And I'm like, awesome. This is awesome.
Yeah.
And they would do this thing like, which is a really cool, I've never been in a band since that would do it, but like we would jam on a riff for like an hour.
Wow.
I did it in high school, obviously.
Yeah,
you do
sure,
with your friends and you're like, we can do this. But with Helmet, we would jam on like a riff for a long time. So that was really good when I first joined the original version of the band in the 90s.
Right.
The only non-original member. I've made a career about being the non-original member. Um, but it was amazing, and it was just like such a good feeling, and I learned a lot. And Paige and I are still really close. We're good friends.
I'm happy to hear that. And you set it up perfectly because I was about to say after Orange Nine was Helmet, and that was essentially the next band you were involved with, correct? Of the
Yeah.
journey. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then after your time with Helmet came to an end, was that around the time that you were into the rival schools? Is that correct on the timeline?
No, I took a break.
Yeah.
I was gonna when Helmet broke up, that kind of broke my heart a little bit
Yeah.
because it was only a year that first time around.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I had come into a band that was like falling apart.
Oh, man.
And it's like really heartbreaking as a fan too. You're just
Totally.
like, like it didn't feel good. And I had met a girl and I'd fallen in love with her. I actually tried to start a band afterwards. I remember I was in Manchester actually, and I knew Helmet was coming to an end. And I had like a guitar and I brought it up to my room. And after being in Orange Nine and Helmet, I looked at the guitar and I was staring at the guitar in my hotel room. And I actually cried a little bit because I was just like, I don't know if you're supposed to say that because I'm supposed to be tougher than that.
No. Everybody knows me as the Feely guy, man. This is the right show. I hope that people come on my podcast and it's notoriously like the breakdown moment. Like all musicians come on here and go, oh, man.
Yeah. Well, hopefully I'll start the trend for you.
Please.
But I remember thinking like, I don't know what to do now.
Yeah.
Like, because both those bands I thought had pretty original styles.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to just like when you pick up a guitar and it's just like this, like G, D, whatever, like even as great as a lot of songs are like that,
Sure.
I just didn't have it. I couldn't think of a way that I could like do something interesting.
Yeah.
And I thought like, this is it. And I tried to start a band afterwards, but like, and I was actually going to sing in the band.
Yeah.
But like anybody that was good enough to be in my band wanted to be in their own band.
Yeah,
so I was in this like weird place where everyone was like, well, my music is like this. And you're like, fuck. No. It's just like, okay. So I met a woman, I fell in love. We had a kid. I like moved to Virginia. I was like faux painting mansions and sort of giving guitar. Yeah, that as one does.
As one does.
And then I got the Bush gig because Dave Sardi, who is the one that hooked me up, he's a producer. I don't know if you know him. He produced like Jet and like a bunch of big records. He did a Helmet record.
The name is familiar, yes.
He's a fantastic producer. He had an incredible band in the 90s called Park Market, but he produced an Orange Nine record, a Helmet record, and a Bush record. And he introduced me to Gavin. I had met him at a party. It was Rick Rubin's birthday in New York. And I was driving like a busted up, like used minivan that couldn't even afford having like taillights in the car. And I was just like surfing every day. And I didn't think I was going to play music ever again.
Wow.
And Rick Rubin's birthday party, I met Dave and he's like, what are you doing? I'm working with a band that needs a guitar player, and I was like, cool. And I thought it was Slayer because he was working with Slayer.
And you're like, I'm going to be in Slayer?
I was like going home, like practicing the Slayer riffs.
Raining blood. You're like, fuck.
Yeah. But it turned out to be, I got a phone call from Gavin, and that's it. He called me when I was out on the beach. I just got surfing, and and then the rest is like our friendship built over the over the long haul with that. But it was interesting, kind of being the only American person in the band or the crew.
Yeah.
And like such a culture shock, and like learning about like this band's, they were such a huge band. They weren't not on my radar, but they weren't on my.
Yeah.
And so to get into this world that had such its own history and fan base, and I love the fans, but it was a huge culture shock to me because, like with the Helmet stuff, I knew them. I knew it was from New York. And then later on afterwards with the Blur stuff, like I didn't know any of them, but I just knew the music so personally.
Yeah. And
but also when I joined Bush, I only did a year or two with them. And then Gavin, we did the solo record. So the solo record and the Time of the Rival Schools record was around the same time. Gavin and I, his solo record, which is, I love that record, and the Institute record, which was a cool record, actually. If it had come out now, I think it would have done better because it was heavy, and I think it threw people off.
Right.
So it was heavier than, or more riffy than some of the Bush stuff. But so we've built this relationship over a long time. And when he decided to put the band back together, you might know the year better than I do. Maybe it was 2010 or something like that.
That sounds
I don't
right.
know.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And we went from like, because the solo record had Love Remains the Same, which was a massive success.
Yes.
And I thought we were going to do this again. And then he was like, we're going to put Bush back together. And I thought, oh, I'm out. You know,
right,
I thought,
right.
You know,
like, here we go again.
Yeah. But he asked me to play with them, and that was really cool. And it's interesting because our relationship keeps growing. Our friendship keeps growing. My ability to make contributions towards the music keep growing. Like my kind of who I am is finding a space in the Bush universe.
Yeah.
And, you know, I know that Robert and Dean talk about a connection, but Corey and I and Gavin are so connected.
I love
it. Like, I can tell if Gavin's in a bad mood if he's in the same room with me and I'm not looking at him. Or I can hear in the music, like, you know, sometimes we'll extend different parts of songs, and I just feel it by not looking at them. We have the same thing. And what's interesting is with Nick, the new drummer, when we were looking for a new drummer, we had all these people come in, and I had actually asked two friends of mine who are big drummers that decided to come down and try out. I won't mention them in case I put them in a weird place with their current band.
Sure.
But I had these people come over, and they came to my house, and I showed them the songs, and I was like, you know, this, and I was like, I would love to have either of these dudes in my band. And so when Nick came in, Nick Corey goes to me, he's like, hey, a friend of mine from college wants to try out for the band. And I was like, cool, you know, because Corey's my brother. And
yeah,
I was like, whatever. And the moment that Nick started playing, I was like, oh my God,
this is it.
I like jumped up on the riser with him, and he doesn't know me. So like we're having this thing, and he's going for it and I'm going for it. And this is a tryout, like, you know, where like, I've been there all day playing with all these different musicians. And I was like, this is the guy. This has got to be the guy. And I was just said to everybody, like, as soon as we stop, I was like, as soon as we stop that first song, I was like, we're done.
That's it.
Yeah,
That's it.
I don't know if everybody felt that way.
Oh,
right
yeah, I saw it. I saw it at the show that you guys just played. I saw you up at the riser. I saw, you know, like I could see it right there. It's amazing. Amazing.
Yeah. And Gavin sent me something the other day. It was, I'm pretty sure it was Gavin on Instagram. It was a Buddy Rich thing where they were interviewing people, and they said like, Buddy Rich was saying, do you know who Buddy Rich is?
Yeah.
Jazz.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he was saying, you know, a great drummer raises the level of the band. Like a great drummer, and this is Buddy Rich talking about, one of the all-times. But when you're playing with somebody like that, it raises the level. Like when I've done records with Josh Freese, like you're on your game. Like he just lifts you up, you know? And the guy asked him, he said, well, what about if you have a not great drummer? He said, get a different band.
Get a different band.
Yeah.
It's so true. It's so true. And I've covered a lot of those iconic 90s albums, and you know, definitely with my love of the Smashing Pumpkins, Jimmy Chamberlain is one of those drummers that emerges as, you know, somebody who's just an incredible drummer and makes them all better when he plays. It's so true. When you hear drummers that elevate everybody else's skill, it just takes the music to a whole new place. So yeah, you can hear it with you guys working together, and it's so cool. I like to believe, by the way, that Rick Rubin was sitting cross-legged on a mountaintop, and he was meditating, and he visualized that you were going to join Bush, and that's how you ended up at the party. Like he foresaw it, because he has this like really guru way about him now. So I like to believe that that's what happened. He like saw the future, and he was like, we must get Chris Traynor at my birthday party in order for him to join Bush.
Yeah. Well, that's the story now. That's what we're going.
That's what we're gonna go with. That's what we're gonna go with. Yeah, your contributions to Bush have been great, because I just think that the latest album that came out it's so good, and the riffs are there, the depth is there. You know, when I first heard Heavy as the Ocean, I was in my car and I was like, what? Like, it was like, whoa, this rips.
Yeah.
And just so deep. Are you playing, technical thing here, are you playing a baritone guitar on some of these songs? Is that how you're getting so heavy and it's not sloppy sounding? It sounds tight, so tight, you know?
Well, Heavy is the Ocean. So much of the heaviness of the record,
Uh-huh.
I don't want to mislead anybody, is like Gavin wanting to be heavy,
Oh, I love that.
you
I
know,
love that.
and I was like coming down when we did this last record.
Uh-huh.
I was coming down from the ranch that I was working on, and I
Yeah.
had like 3 guitars without cases. I had like my 1971 Les Paul Custom. I had oh, it's not here. I thought it was in my studio. I have a 63 SG Junior and
Uh-huh.
a cheap baritone, like
Nice.
a Mexican Fender baritone. It comes from Mexico.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and it and so we would just switch it. And you know what was interesting about this record is everything went so fast
Yeah.
that like, and Eric Ron's the producer, and him and I have I think he has a really good relationship with the band, but him and I have a friendship as well, and we've worked on other stuff together. So we would just keep like trading stuff and like trying, you know. So I'd be like, oh, here's a baritone, and I would like tune it. And when we came to do this record, I mean, when we came to tour on this record, I had to get 2 other baritones.
Yeah.
I kept going like, oh, you know, like I was just moving so fast. I didn't realize like I was doing different tunings. And
Yeah.
so Heavy is the Ocean to me is an interesting song because when I first heard that, when Gavin played me that, most of what's on there is what Gavin had wrote. So
Wow.
sometimes like he'll come in with a song and I'll add stuff, or I'll come in with a riff and he'll sing on it.
Right.
But that song is like one where I heard and I was like, this is great. I added some like top layer things and like sound effects. A lot of what I do in the studio, unfortunately, sounds like keyboards. So like, you know, like it gets remanded to, you know, like noise candy and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That one I heard it and I was like, this is great. And it reminds me of Alien from the first record.
Yes.
Like it reminds me of something that would be on the first record, not like a hit song, but like a deep track that you could hold on to. And it feels really good. And we feel like, you know, we consider ourselves wolves. We always say like, because over the course of the past 20 some odd years that I've been playing with Gavin, we've had different managers and different labels and different bandmates and like different, you know, different everything. And we always say that, you know, like, well, I think I said it first, but if he wants to say he said it first, he can.
You get credit. You get credit.
I said it first.
Yes, here you said it first.
I said, you know, like they threw us to the wolves, but little did they know that we are wolves, you know. And
Yeah.
I just think like
that's awesome.
We were out there, and now people are like, there's a hype about the band again. Like people is like, Bush is cool. Like everyone's writing, you know, and I'm not tooting my own horn here because we've been doing kind of the same thing for a long time.
Sure.
But like we were like working to this point where people are starting to recognize the band as being like, hey, they have new stuff that's good.
Yeah.
Like they play a heavy show, it sounds modern, and we feel good about that. But we've been working hard for a long time to like kind of break through, you know, like being like people considering us a nostalgia act, because we feel like we've been putting out good records for a long time.
Right. Right.
And we've actually had hits. Like Sound was #1. Like, so it's not like, you know, like it's you know, obviously More Than Machines is #1 as well, but we keep like knocking at that door and saying like, put us out in front of anybody. And what's cool now is that, I don't know if you noticed this at the show that you came to, the age group is diverse. There's like teenagers to 60-year-olds.
Mm-hmm. I saw
and people are like rocking. So it's like, we feel like finally we're kind of breaking through and showing people like, hey, we're still good, man.
Yeah.
We're still doing new stuff that's good.
Yeah. 100%. And it's interesting because for all of us when Bush was exploding in the 90s and becoming such a big band, people who weren't living during that time don't realize that because you didn't have the internet and MTV was giving you new bands over and over again, you kind of had to pick the one that you were going to really, or the five that you were going to like obsess over a little bit, because there was just a lot of options. There's a lot of choices. It's just interesting when I make content about a band from that era that some people are laser focused in on, and then others are like, oh, nobody cared about them or whatever. And you're like, no, that's not true. You just had to pick your wolves you wanted to run with.
I love that you did Hum.
Yeah. Yeah. Hum is a band that so many people, they said thank you. And because they're like, nobody knows about this band. And I'm like, well, I know about it and you know about it, but you're right that we have these pockets back then, right? You only had enough time to really fall in love with so many bands because it wasn't as available other than getting the physical copy, waiting for the video to air, whatever weird thing Beavis and Butthead would throw at you and be like, what is this? It's or 120 Minutes or Headbangers Ball. And so Bush was another one of those ones that was huge. And you'd see Gavin's handsome face all over your MTV and you'd be going, these guys seem cool, but it was another one of those ones that was among these so many hit bands at the time that I'm really getting a chance to enjoy Bush's catalog more now. And that's what I think is so cool, that what I saw there that night was you guys were going through songs spanning decades.
Yeah.
And it was connecting to everybody in the crowd. You saw people singing along on the new stuff. You saw people singing along on the past few record stuff. You saw people singing on the old school, OG 90s stuff. Yeah. And that's just a really cool position to be in as a band, because it all felt together. It felt a natural progression of music. It didn't feel like, and now we're going to go completely out of left field, and do the next half hour bluegrass. It was a building towards momentum for Bush, and you can really feel it with what you guys are doing. So I think it's a pretty exciting time for you guys.
Yeah, I thank you for noticing that, and I feel the same way. And I just think like you're seeing a band that has a rich history, and a singer that's and he's my friend, and he's the singer of my band. So maybe it's doesn't seem genuine, but it is that he's one of the, he's just has an iconic voice. When you hear his voice,
it's unmistakable.
Yeah. And so to me, like, and he's one of the last dudes.
Yeah.
That era.
Totally.
Like, come out and see this band while we're hitting our stride.
Yeah.
And he just sounds amazing. And there's nothing like, we're ready to go. Like when we go out there, we put everything out there. We never phone it in. Sometimes beforehand, I'm sitting in the dressing room and I'm like, because it's like we tour a lot.
Yeah,
but
you
when
do.
we go out there, it doesn't feel like that. We look at each other. We look at the fans. We're not letting anybody down, and we're going to the mat for that show. We do it.
Oh, man. You had posted some concert pics because you came through close to LA, I think, last summer. And I didn't get a chance to make it because it was, there's so many shows, right? And so I missed it, but I saw these pictures and you guys are leaping around stage. You were giving your all. And I was not disappointed when I saw you at Anaheim. I was like, these guys are crushing it up there. Just so much exertion. And, getting a chance to shake Gavin's hand backstage and, meet this guy that I'd been hearing for 30 years. And you're right, being one of the original voices that's still alive. I often talk with people, after being with the DeLeo brothers and Kim Thayil from Soundgarden. I mean, back to back, those are two bands that lost their frontman. And then you go down the list and you go,
MVP lost too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's so many that you go down the list and you go, there's just so many that are gone from that time. The male vocalists.
Yeah.
And to hear Gavin sing now, it does take you back, but he is still pushing forward. He's taking us back, but he's pushing forward at the same time. And it's really, really, really cool. So I'm going to encourage everybody, if Bush comes through your town, you got to go see him. They put on a really killer show. A lot of great energy up there. Just the sound, it resonates. And, you got to see Chris Traynor walk up the riser and, be in lockstep with Nick up there. So it's pretty great. So cool.
Well, I appreciate it, and I can't wait to have you out to the next one.
Yeah, I will be there. I will be there with bells on, and I'm excited. And we're gonna work on this hiking club, man. I'm not gonna stop until I convince Robert DeLeo, you. I'm gonna just find all the people that want to like go out and fish and get out in nature, and it's gonna be great.
Yeah. Before, you don't have to do it on air, but before you interview anybody in the email preparation, you'd be like, "How do you feel about nature?"
Yes, totally. I just need to do that. I need to basically say like, hey, thanks so much for coming on Waterproof Records. I'm so excited that you're going to be here. How do you feel about like nature and camping and hiking and stuff? And they're like,
you might lose some guests.
Yeah, I know. They're going to be like, no, thanks. Well, there's some, right, that I could instinctively look at and go, you don't seem like a big camper to me. But dude, just a thrill to have you on, and just a huge body of work and so many bands that you played with. And again, Helmet was a big one. That was, I would have been geeking out like you too, getting that time with Paige. What a killer band. I've done some videos on them, but I got to do more. I remember getting Meantime and just being like, wow, when I was a kid. It was like so cool. And like so many of us said, they were the first guys. You were starting a band, and my parents wouldn't let me grow my hair long when I was a kid. So you saw a helmet and you're like, sweet, you can rock with short hair. Yes, you can be in
shorts.
In shorts, you can wear shorts and short hair, and you can be a badass, riff machine. That was the best part. Oh man. Well, Chris, thanks again for coming on the show, man. Is there anything that you want to share, promote, or shout out here on the show today, or just to have them, go buy the latest Bush album, and all of them actually?
Yeah, I don't promote anything. I know I should have something to promote, but I don't.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh well, I'll do that work for you. Don't worry.
Yeah,
about
thank
it.
you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, thanks, dude. I'm gonna turn my gaze up this way, and thanks again for coming on Waterproof Records. I really appreciate it.
That was great, man. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Wow. I mean, come on. This is incredible. The guests that come on the show, I feel lucky to be in the position that I'm in, to have an opportunity to talk to them and talk about bands and talk about passion for music. And Chris said it right, that it's because we feel a certain way when we hear a song. And I think that's why you listen to this show, is that there's just something so magical. And that quote that he said about music is the art that passes through you. Oof, boy, that got me good. I hope you check out all the stuff going all the way back to Orange 9mm and all the way through. There's so many bands that we talked about. If you've never really checked them out before, you definitely should. Lots of different influences and styles that he's had in his career over the years, and I'm just excited to see where they go next. So thank you again for listening to Waterproof Records. I couldn't do it without you. So make sure, I hope you're sharing this podcast with your friends and saying, Jacob Givens quite possibly might be the voice of the generation. I'm just going to throw that out there. But leave me some comments. I always try to follow up with people when they write to me, but go in to the iTunes, Apple Store, and give me a review. Give me those stars. Tell people that you love the show. I can't do this without you. And I can't do it without my sponsor, DistroKid. So thanks again. Make sure to check out distrokid.com/VIP/waterproof. Get that 30% off. They make this show possible. So thanks again for joining me. We'll see you next time on Waterproof Records.
Things are gonna change. I can feel it.
If this gonna be that kind of party, I'm gonna
Waterproof Records. Waterproof